Hey everybody, this is David Skrika here. Stock chart of the day for the 23rd of July, 2024. So today we're going to look at Cobalt and EV. So recently, Trump has said that he'll end EV mandates, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, I've talked about lithium in the past, so I don't want to beat the drum to death on lithium. And, I've said over and over again, when all these guys in Vancouver, all kind of the promoter types, started turning their precious metals deals into lithium and gold, lithium deals, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that was a real sign that we were kind of nearing the top of the lithium market. And of course, lithium has completely crashed. And cobalt's another one. Cobalt and is something, copper is another one that you need for EVs. And you can see that cobalt it's actually had a spike before 2020, but then after 2020, when people really started pushing the EVs, it went from 26,000 US dollars a ton to over 80,000. Now it's actually lower. It's 23,000. It's actually back to the 2016 lows, when actually, by the way, most commodities low. Just think this way. Gold back then in 2015, 2016 was about 1,100 an ounce. I think silver was like in the teens. Both of those have essentially doubled in price, and cobalt is right back at those lows. So just think about where cobalt is. And I just think that EVs were hype. I said all along they wouldn't be able to meet the mandates. There's just too many problems with them. They're too heavy, they're too expensive, the batteries lose value too quickly. And let's say they do end up working out. It's probably like .com was 25 years ago, in the sense that none of these .com companies can make money because the technology, there wasn't enough people using the internet for everything, et cetera, in the late 90s. And of course, that changed 10 or 15 years later. Well, EVs are probably the same way. The technology will probably be good enough for them to compete with gasoline and fossil fuel cars, but not for another 10 or 20 years, right? So we'll go quickly look at the EVs. Of course, Tesla, which actually they report tonight, so kind of timely that we're talking about EVs. They had this big run here recently, but Tesla's actually, out of all the Magnificent Seven or whatever you want to call them, like FANG stocks, whatever people want to call these things nowadays. We're going to get a 5-year chart. It's done the worst out of all of them after this huge run, again, after COVID. It's actually been in this kind of trading range for nearly 4 years now, from early 2021. And, every time it's gotten down to about this 125 to 150 area, it's rallied. And every time it's gotten up to about 300 or so, it's kind of topped since 2022, after it topped. But even this move here in late 2021 ended up being a false breakout. It didn't lead anywhere. So anyway, as you see at 240, it's probably not a bad short here. They had some good news on deliveries, but again, with us getting away from EV mandates, if and Tesla's like cars lose value like crazy. Like I think within the first 3 to 5 years, they lose like 50% of their value, which is way more than, say, like a Toyota or Honda or a regular car. So, and then of course we've got a Rivian. Another problem with all these companies, they're really expensive, and the cheapest car makers are in China. Right now, they have about a 27% tariff on the Chinese EVs, and they're going to up it to 100%. So, and that reason being is because if you buy a Rivian or Tesla, you're minimum paying $60,000-$70,000, and you're probably paying close to 100,000. Where a lot of these Chinese are cheap little $20,000-$30,000 cars. A lot of these Chinese EVs. So you can see Rivian, which we actually did well shorting this. I think we shorted it I think around here after this bounce in 2022, and I remember covering it. Oh, no, it was here in 2022. That's right. Yeah, around 50, 60. And I remember covering it in the 20s, and I never really got back into the short again. So you can see it has a little move here. Volkswagen did say they were investing in a Rivian plant, but again, if you look at the valuations of these things, like Rivian has a huge valuation, and it's not that much. Like it's like a quarter or something, a third of the valuation of Ford or GM. And of course, they sell very few cars. And of course, some of these other there's these other smaller car makers that are mostly like garbage and junk. And other than the big Chinese ones, like the Chinese car maker, I think the largest Chinese one is a larger company and sells more EVs than Tesla. So if you ever want to see a hands-on, I would say, I guess, hands-on telling of the EV stories. This guy has I'm a big give him a thumbs up. I'm a big believer and fan of these these travel and food vlogs. So I just lost my train of thought. I'm not being unprofessional. I just lost my train of thought for a second. It happens once in a while. So he does these, if you like fish and chips, what Dave Portnoy is to pizza at Barstool, this guy is to fish and chips. He does a ton of fish and chips reviews. Yeah, I think he lives near Leeds in England. And anyhow, he has his EV. It's a Porsche, and he's always just ranting and raving about it. And then he's talking about how much it's depreciated. He talks about the pain in the butt it is, recharging all the time, the length it takes, the time it wastes, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a good hands-on view of what a pain in the butt owning an EV is, especially if you're going to do driving. Okay, if you're just going to drive around the city, go home at night and charge your EV in your home, fine. But if you're going to like travel from, he lives in Leeds, like I said, Leeds to London, or he does trips into Europe, it shows you what a pain in the butt it is. And I had a firsthand knowledge of this or firsthand experience with this in 2022. I went to England with my dad and my stepbrother, and then we went to Europe afterwards. And when we were in England, we drove from London to Leeds, and I rented a car, and it was an EV. And when I rented the car, they gave me an EV. The EV they gave me was only half full. It can only go like 130 miles or something. Leeds was I think it's about 200 miles to London, from London to Leeds. And even at full, this thing was 260. You'd have to fill it up to come back. So I said no, and they just gave me a gas car. And then on the way back, we filled up the gas car and drove back to London. So, there was kind of my experience. There's no way I wanted one of these things. Of course, living here in the island, I've seen actually a couple of Teslas in the island, which I've been shocked about. But living here on the island, where we don't have the infrastructure and the charging stations and stuff like that, it makes no sense whatsoever. And also parts, like if you've got a problem with your battery or one of these EV, car parts, it's going to be a disaster to replace. So I will have to say one thing about Cobalt. Cobalt's probably nearing a buy down here, because again, you're back to these lows. Like I said, when commodities bottom, like go look at where the CRB or other commodities. Well, let's just like do a couple other commodities just quickly to see. So despite the problem, because Cobalt's still used for other things, right? You can see silver here in that, we'll go 10 years, in that 2015 period. You can see, like I said, it was $14 an ounce. It has more than doubled. You're going to see the same thing with gold. Gold 10 years ago was, like I said, $11 an ounce, or sorry, just over $1,000 an ounce. And now is of course, 2,400. So it's more than doubled. Crude in that 2015 period, bottomed at about $30 a barrel. Now it's $77. So crude's another one, by the way. I'm not very positive on it going forward here. So, guys, I've said that in a while. The crude doesn't really look like there's any upward catalyst to me. But anyhow, that's just what I wanted to show you. So probably from a value standpoint, you can't just be blinded by, because Cobalt's used for a lot more than just EVs, right? So probably Cobalt is a buy down here. And there's not too many pure Cobalt plays, et cetera, but it probably is a buy down here. But it just shows you, I think, what you're seeing with lithium, Cobalt, even copper's come back off from nearly $5 to $4.15. I think you're seeing that fantasy world of all this EV demand now being sapped out. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah, watch the McMaster. I highly recommend his channel, especially with his rants on EVs. And like I said, if you're a fan of fish and chips, you'll definitely like his channel as well. Okay, everybody, take care, and I hope you enjoyed this.